Our guest, Mr. Joseph Ayalogu, is a former Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland, former Nigerian representative to the United Nations. Ambassador, thank you for coming on the program.
Yeah, good morning.
Talk to us about what your interpretation of the back and forth around the war between Israel, Iran, and the United Kingdom is. On one hand, they came to an agreement, a draft resolution or memorandum of understanding. That memorandum was signed, I think, on Friday, but the Straits is still not fully open because those were some of the terms that were part of that memorandum of understanding. In fact, the other day, President Donald Trump literally lashed out on Benjamin Netanyahu, talking about the Hezbollah-Lebanon issue. Are we really making progress? Because the compounding effect is affecting all of us right here in Nigeria, given the price of PMS, the price of gas. So if it didn't affect us, maybe it wouldn't have been part of our business, but now it affects all of us one way or the other, but at different levels.
Yeah, it's a complex problem because, yes, the U.S. went and attacked Iran for all sorts of reasons. And then you've got to the point where at least there is an MOU and an indication of an interest in bringing the conflict to an end. Just that it obviously has been stuck with all the part of the complexities affecting the actualization of the peace. The principle of which is the attitude of Israel to keeping the peace itself, because it's still attacking Lebanon, and that is a sticking point for Iran. Iran feels that the Hezbollah group that is all part of the group that they want to support and so on. So, and Israel is having difficulty with really containing or accepting to let the Hezbollah do as they wish. So that is the sticking point. And unless there's enough pressure to Israel to conform with the ceasefire agreement or peace agreement, or probably pressure on Iran to not to worry about what happens to Hezbollah and the others, then we can see a difficulty in actually getting the peace to work. And that will be a sad thing to see, because that is likely to affect the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and of course all the various impacts on global trade. One wouldn't lose hope. I think Trump is trying to put pressure on Israel and so on. He's actually sent very strong message to Netanyahu. We're hoping that it works, because it's definite that Trump himself realizes the importance of bringing this matter to a close. We're surprised that he actually agreed to an MOU or a peace agreement that included certain things that were not necessarily in U.S. interest. Especially, it wasn't part of the reason why he started the war in the first place. So that's a good approach on the part of the U.S. We'll keep watching what happens between now and probably the next couple of weeks. Of course, any day that the Strait of Hormuz is not open or accessible, it has its impact on global trade, especially the price of oil. Yeah, so that's the situation now.
Indeed, and one wonders about, what the true state of things really are, on this agreement. Because in one breath, U.S. Vice President is saying that Iran has agreed to allow inspectors, international inspectors, come look at its nuclear program. On the other hand, Iran is saying we haven't made any, new commitments, different from what were obtained before the war. And so we hope that this does not lead to another resumption of hostilities, because the world is already stressed, in the global economy, to be precise. But let's head to another important matter, which, this time around affects more of the African continent, and it has to do with, the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. We've seen, videos come through on social media of citizens, South African citizens, giving an ultimatum to African, migrants to exit the country. We've seen some as far as handing over businesses built by Africans who are not primarily South African nationals, taking from them and hand it over to South African nationals. What are your thoughts on the role of the South African government in reining in on this? Have they done enough?
Well, frankly, I don't think they've done enough, because I've listened to the speeches of the key operators in South Africa, the president and some of them, and except perhaps the opposition leader, Julius Malema, the rest seem to still blame the Africans who are in South Africa for even being there. Now, this is, of course, it is quite saddening. Nobody would have expected that South Africa, that the whole of Africa, especially the frontline states, including Nigeria, give a lot to help them pull out their kernel from the fire, I would say, have turned around to be so violently antagonistic to Africans. It's not in the spirit of African unity, African brotherhood, which was what drove these countries to help South Africa in the first place. So one expects that the leadership in South Africa should do a lot more. It is first of all their responsibility to protect the lives and freedoms of people who are in their country, whether they are legal or illegal. But to create the impression that to create the impression that that's not their primary responsibility seems to add fuel to the problem. That's one point. And then, of course, there's a lot of mob action going on. So the message to the ordinary South African is to remember that there is the spirit of Africanness, which has guided the conduct of most other African countries towards them in the past. And that if they're worried about external influences, why is it only targeted at Africans? They're not worried about any other, even the Boers that live with them, and so on. So, but it's difficult to even educate the mob or control the mob or get them to think seriously when probably they see themselves as not getting the best of what they think they should get. But then these are the things their government should also take into consideration. There is still economic appetite going on. If they work hard at balancing the books, it's possible that a lot more Africans, that is South Africans, who have a job, and that they need to be, there's need for a lot of sensitization that I don't want to say that South Africans are lazy, but that has been said now and then, that these foreigners, other Africans in their midst are not necessarily taking their job. They actually at times create jobs, which is actually the reality. But it's at the end of the day a very serious matter that undermines real African unity, and especially South Africa is a key member of the AU and of the African continent itself. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk. Sometimes I get a bit worried about the understanding of this whole xenophobic attack. On one hand, I'll give you an example so you can help me dimension it from your expertise as an ambassador, as a diplomat. On one hand, it looks more like Afrophobia than anything else. The South African economy looks, from what we know, is literally being controlled by the minority whites, which is like 80% of the economy, and the whites, I think, about 15 to 20% of the population. So if you go to Western Cape, that is controlled by the DA, you don't see all of this agitation that you see happening in places like KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, or you go to Johannesburg in Gauteng and all of those places, the neighborhood. They don't go to, and I challenged the gentleman, I said, where I would think that you're xenophobic, whoever is perpetrating the xenophobia is serious, go to places like Western Cape, like Cape Town. Are you saying that there are no French, Germans, Dutch, British, all of these guys in, say, Western Cape, for instance, who are undocumented? And he started talking about some marine economy and all that and all of that. So that's on one hand. Is this really xenophobia or Afrophobia? And the other hand, you mentioned it in passing as well. When, for instance, Nigerians go there, I don't think Nigerians go to get government jobs. The Nigerians who go there go to create jobs. So what jobs are they taking from South Africans? And then also speak to us about what seems like, quote and unquote, the implicit complicity of the ANC leadership. Because there's no, when you listen to Cyril Ramaphosa, there's nothing so forceful about the way he presents this case, without doubt, without necessarily undermining the need for people to protect their country. If you can, nexus all of this together for us.
Well, I have probably hinted at most of what you've said. It's not, you wouldn't say it is xenophobic because it is largely Afrophobic. They are not bothering kicking out Americans or Dutch or Europeans in their midst, who are actually evidently living much better than most of them. So it's their angst or bad feeling, it seems to be targeted at Africans. So that is there. And of course, you're right. I am not satisfied with what the government has done. Even the rhetoric of the president, they should be firm to say this is not right, this is not acceptable, it's a criminal offense to do this, and put out police or whatever they have in the street to call as many people that get involved in all that to order. And it's unfortunate that they are targeting even businesses of people. I've seen a lot of some of the posts deliberately going to people's businesses and taking over their businesses. Well, I wouldn't. It's unfortunate, and the government has to even begin to think of compensation. Even the people who have lost their livelihood and investments there. These are the things that countries, African countries, Nigeria included, should forcibly demand from the South African government. We need affirmative action from the government of South Africa to really call this to order, rein in their people and use the law. They have the law that prevent such attacks. So it's a matter of implementing it. But if they treat them with kid gloves and think and carry on like though that this is okay, it's the fault of the migrants and so on, then the South African will continue doing what they are doing, and that's not good for the image of the country, and it's not even good for them themselves, because after some time, when they end up finish driving out the African foreigners, they might turn around against themselves. Who knows? But for us who are watching, who are actually victims, we feel very bad, because it is not deserving at all, especially of countries that have actively supported and played key roles in the relieving Black South Africa of the shackles of apartheid, and supporting them in every way, politically, diplomatic, monetary, and so on. So that is the fact. It's a challenge for the South African government. They have to do a lot more than they are doing. And I know that a lot of African countries, Nigeria included, seem to, for now, be reluctant in a reciprocal response. But I think at a point, and if it continues, we would have to think of what to do.
And that's where
there are South African businesses in Nigeria. At least these people, whoever the Nigerians who are coming back, with stories of lost assets and so on, they have to be compensated out of money that we take from the South African businesses in Nigeria. I don't know. This is just my thought on it.
And that's where I'm headed. You've also touched on, what could be long-term consequences for South Africa in terms of trade and diplomatic relations. And we've seen a bit of that, when President Cyril Ramaphosa looked to Ghana for, to canvass investment for other African countries and not Nigeria. And some would say that itself is an affront, considering the history that Nigeria shares with South Africa. An affront on many levels, the treatment of its nationals in that country, and the bypassing, of Nigeria in its attempt at rebuilding relations. So in that regard, really, you talked about reciprocal action, and some would say that even Nigeria could be mired in that particular consideration, because the South African businesses that are in Nigeria also have Nigerians, gainfully employed. So what should really be the ideal response to check this, humiliation, continued humiliation and mistreatment of Nigerians in South Africa?
Well, what we have, the options we have, of course, is a peaceful option, diplomacy, get the South African government to really see that what is happening is wrong, and get their people to understand that what is happening is wrong. It's not even in their own interest. Get them either to understand why and comport themselves, or to be made to comport themselves, especially with regard to foreigners. So that is one of the options. The option is, of course, there's other options after some time, and we keep hearing about bad treatment, loss of time, loss of life, definitely loss of assets. We will probably decide that it's a possibility that we would consider reciprocal actions. And well, you seem to think that because Nigerians are in some of the South African businesses here, yes, fine. We don't want to do that. It's not one of the best immediate options we want to take because of that. But then, even then, you can nationalize. You can nationalize their assets here. Use that in paying, compensating the Nigerians who are coming back from there, having lost all that they invested in South Africa. These are possibilities. Right. It's a situation that shouldn't have happened. Okay. But the reality is that it is happening, and there are many things you could think of, but which you are not really, because we are African, ready to do easily.
Okay. Ambassador, thank you so much. In fact, we had a conversation with a gentleman. He said he was a Pan-Africanist, but when we engaged him, his Pan-Africanism, I began to be in doubt in my head. So there are deeper issues that may be a bit more cultural and historical gaps that are playing out in South Africa. Some have even said the people at the vanguard have inherited what they can get. The younger ones are wondering what they've got from this whole end of apartheid. Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu is a former Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland and former Nigerian representative to the United Nations. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for inviting me.